Hello, welcome to another episode of Intellectual Intercourse. I'm Adam.
And I'm Tranna. Adam, what are you most excited about in your life right now?
I think that I'm just looking forward to the holidays. I'm not teaching, I'm not doing anything, and I am just going to basically set my year up with the motto of no. Like, I'm not taking on new things or new projects. I'm like at capacity. So I'm looking forward to the calm before the storm that's about to come. But hopefully, the storm won't be as intense because I'm just going to say no to everything. I have an autoresponder in place that any email I get is just going to be like a loud Sagittarius no.
I want that too.
What about you?
I don't know. Well, right now I'm working on co-creating and writing a TV show that I'm really excited about. That's sort of my main focus, and kind of similarly to you, I kind of just want to say no to everything that isn't that. I don't know how possible that will be, but yeah, we'll
Yeah,
see.
nice.
But that's not my real question for you today.
I'm scared.
You should
Please
be.
break it to me gently.
I'll try. The big question that I have for you today is, are you scared of aging?
um, well, maybe even before we go into it, I'm curious, how old are you?
No one knows. I could be 3 years old. I could be 500 years old, but I'm probably closer to 37. How old are you?
Um, I mean, I think it's one of those things where we could probably become really stupid and just be like, what is time? What is age? But from a calendar
Yeah.
perspective, I'm 39 years old. I'm at the cusp of 40, and that's really scary.
Yeah, which is why I think like this is the right time for this conversation.
Uh-huh.
And it's strange because, and I think people that are like, let's say 20 years older than us would be mad at us for having this conversation
Sure.
right now because they'd be like, shut the fuck up. Like 40 or approaching 40 is still quite young in the grand scheme of things. Um, and there are people who believe that aging is a gift,
Uh-huh.
a privilege. And I guess it is sort of objectively, but it's not without its complications. And I think it's also strange. Like for me, I think what makes this sort of phase in life a little strange is that I remember that like this is basically the age of like my friends' parents when I was in elementary school.
Uh-huh.
And I feel like mentally, spiritually, all of it much more like the 12-year-old kid than the parent.
Yeah. And it's also interesting to realize that when you were a kid looking at these adults, they just didn't have things figured out
No, at
either.
all.
Like, I put adults at that time that were in their 40s or early 40s as like on a pedestal. Like, they knew so much, they had life figured out. And when I look around me and I see 40-year-olds now, I'm sort of surprised that, like, wow, there was a big disconnect between what I thought then and what I think now.
Yeah, absolutely. Also for me, like I feel like a measure of time is Sex in the City.
Mhm.
And now I'm like the same age as Carrie in like season 5, 6. Like, so
Mhm.
it's like towards the end of the show. And kind of like looking up to parents in the way that you described and thinking that they had everything figured out. Like, I think that because I started watching Sex in the City when I was pretty young, like
Mhm.
13. And I think that that gave me this fantasy of what life in your 30s would be like.
Mhm.
And in some way, my 30s have really resembled a lot of what I've seen on Sex and the City, and in other ways, like not at all.
Yeah.
But it's just surreal to kind of like be at this place in time and like you said, like approaching 40, even though I still have a ways to go. Um, it's weird.
I don't know if you have a ways to go because I think time is going faster. And I really have this theory that like time is not the same anymore. And we're living on an accelerated timeline. Our bodies are not handling stress the same way. are like we're expected to have more, produce more, we're exhausted more. So I think even physically, the same timeline as what we've had historically or our parents had is just not equivalent to today.
So do you think like so are basically are you saying that like the context in which we are in our mid to late 30s is very different than the context of our parents' mid to late 30s?
Yeah, I think so. And I think the demands or expectations of us mentally and physically are much higher. We have to deal with like I guess like an accelerated amount of information, demands, production, and our bodies take a toll on that.
Yeah. And I think too like like I grew up in a low income household, and but despite that, it was like we had everything we needed and even
Mhm.
wanted, and like it never really felt like there was like a threat of like ending up on the streets. But now you could have a really well paying job and end up homeless.
I know.
Like it's everything is just so scary
Mhm.
and unpredictable and so uncertain, where it felt like even as kids in the 90s, it felt like every year was kind of better than the last, and I think that as kids, we all kind of had big dreams for our future, and
Mhm.
it's like it's just not the same world.
Yeah.
So it's like and some of those dreams, like, even if it's something as simple as owning a home, just is basically unattainable for so many people of our age.
Yeah. And I think that it's not getting easier. Like we're
No.
not seeing relief. If anything, it's getting
Wor
harder to obtain
exactly.
these dreams. Um, the fears are getting bigger. The struggle is getting bigger. Like we're had a very interesting moment where it's like a larger portion of the population are struggling, and I think that that's going to be wild to see what happens in the next 5 to 10 years.
Is that part of your fear of aging? Like, the way that the world is changing at the same time that you're getting older?
A bit. I mean, now that we're talking about it, I definitely have the fear. It's not the first thing that comes to mind for me, but I guess like the ability to work hard and to have a job that pays and to sort of have security around you. Like it's a really big fear that like working hard is not enough anymore. Like you
Yeah,
need to be privileged, you need to be lucky, you need to make really smart decisions and take big risks to like even survive.
yeah,
And I don't know, that's scary to think that we're going to, I think, maybe transition into a state of capitalism that we haven't seen before, and it's going to be painful,
yeah, but necessary.
but necessary, yes.
So what is the first thing that comes to mind, maybe on a more personal level for you when you think about yourself aging?
The first one that like hits me emotionally is um, that other people are aging. Like my
Mm,
family and my parents, I've had so many uh, family members pass away in recent years, and every time I age, there's like a lump in my stomach that just sort of like grows a bit bigger, and it gets a little bit harder to um, accept that like I'm getting older, but that also means that everybody around me is getting older, and that time is limited.
yeah,
And there's a really big part of me that has a really uncomfortable, emotional, like holding on to hoping that I will be as strong or as connected to my family as I want to be. Like we've kind of used this metaphor on other episodes, but like finding a radio frequency to
yeah.
like connect with somebody and just show how much I love them. And I also feel that with my parents. And like as time progress, I have this like fantasy that someday we're just going to meet and know each other and something's going to click in place. And as I get older and they get older, I just fear that that
You're
might never happen.
right.
Yeah.
That's rough. Are you is there a part of you that can attempt to be at peace with the fact that that might not happen?
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's still worth striving for, but is there a part of you that's able to maybe take that pressure off of yourself?
Yeah. I guess like, and we've discussed this quite a bit in the last year, you and I, separate from the podcast, but this healing fantasy is what I've called it, that like
Mm,
there's just something going to click in place. And actually, like, I've been working really hard to think that that's actually limiting me from the ability to connect to what the actual relationship is now with my family, and embrace those moments and find the quality connection in the small elements where we do overlap, and that ability to do that connection versus putting so much pressure on everything being healing and finding this
yeah,
like utopia is actually keeping me from the connection that I'm looking for with them.
right. Yeah, you have to lower the standard
Yeah.
or, like, bring the fantasy into reality,
Yeah.
I guess.
Mhm. And what about you? Do you have a fear of aging?
I do. I guess, like, the fear or, like, the aspect of aging that scares me the most that comes to mind first, and maybe I'm just more selfish than you, is I'm just really scared of becoming unfuckable. I'm scared of becoming unattractive
Mhm.
and, like, ugly
Mhm.
based on the way that our society has sort of laid out, standards of beauty and all of that, because I don't feel that way when I look at older people. Like,
Mhm.
very often I find older people to be the most attractive, especially women, like, not in a sexual way, but, like, I'm just really drawn to, like, the beauty and radiance that a lot of older women possess. Um, there are some very hunky older men that
Mhm.
I definitely am attracted to. Um, but I guess my fear about that, like, becoming undesirable, is probably more related to the privilege of beauty and the sort of currency that it can be in this capitalistic world, you
Sure.
know? It's like, I mean, let's just face it, like, people that are more on the conventionally attractive side tend to get more opportunities, and
Mhm.
especially, like, working in show business and entertainment, like, appearance is such a big part of that, and I hate that it's such a big part of it, because I don't think that my fears of becoming unfuckable are necessarily internally,
Mhm.
derived. Like, I think it's really much more of an external thing.
Okay. And I guess just to like go a bit deeper there,
Yeah.
the idea of being unfuckable, is it really that you are afraid that people won't want to have sex with you, or is it that you won't feel attractive enough to want to have people to have sex with you?
Oh, I think definitely the first one,
The
that
first
I'm
one.
scared that people won't want to, like, have sex with me.
Okay.
Yeah. Because I think that, like, I mean, God willing, I think that I can find a way to, like, feel myself, and I think the irony is that, like, I'm not even very sexually active, and, like, I think this has come up in some of our other episodes, in the sense that I really am at this point in my life now where I don't need to be in love, but I need to have some sort of, like, chemistry or connection with someone that I'm going to be intimate with.
Hmm.
And that doesn't, those kinds of people that I feel that way for are not necessarily a dime a dozen.
Sure.
So I go through these stretches in my life, some of them quite long, of just, like, celibacy,
Yeah.
and I don't feel like I'm missing anything. Because if I did, then I would put in the effort to have those moments and experiences. But I guess there's this part of me that is just like, that even right now, there's a part of me inside that's like, "Girl, you should just be having sex with everyone right now, because in a few years, you might not be able to get it anymore."
Uh-huh.
But you also can't bank up on those experiences either, you know what I mean? Like, if I don't feel called to that right now,
Yeah.
I can't it doesn't make sense to force myself into those situations in the name of my future unfuckable
Yeah.
self.
So then where does the fear come from? Like, what's it rooted in?
I
Is it
don't
really a fear of being unfuckable, or just like not desired, or like it's going to limit opportunities? Like, where does
Maybe the desired thing is a better word than unfuckable,
Okay.
like being undesirable, because
Yeah.
I guess that I don't know. I was about to say that, like, maybe there's a part of whatever little power I feel in my life that maybe is partly derived from, like, the effect that I can have on certain men, but, like, in very, like, ridiculous contexts, you know what I mean?
Mhm.
Like, I guess to be more direct about it, like, I think that I know how to sort of turn on a kind of, like, hyper femininity that a lot of men find attractive and that I enjoy engaging with as a fantasy,
Mhm.
and I really enjoy that, and I do feel a certain amount of power when I'm in that mode, but it's not authentically me.
Right.
You know what I mean? I'm really putting it's like a persona that I'm, like, tapping into, almost like a superhero, like,
Uh-huh.
turning into like Sailor Moon when she waves her wand and she's naked and sparkling and then turns into, like, Sailor Moon
Sure.
in all her hotness and her glory, you know? I guess it's kind of like that, and I guess because I do derive, again, a certain amount of power and even, amusement
Uh-huh.
from that, that I'm scared of losing that.
Yeah, well, first, just like a side note, I thought Sailor Moon was so hot. I think
Is.
it was the first cartoon that I was like, "Wow,
Ah,
this is very erotic, powerful women."
yeah.
So, I guess what I'm hearing you say is, like, there's in youthfulness or, like, in staying young and also a feminine element to it, there's a power for you that you feel you can access in society to sort of live in a certain way that you fear losing?
It's not even in society, it's really it kind of relates to our episode about, like, our relationship to, like, the digital world, like, I think it's a power that I, experience more, like, online.
Yeah.
It's not because I don't like, when I'm, out and about in the real world, like, especially when I'm, like, performing or making an effort to sort of tap into my feminine power and, like, really channel a kind of hyper femininity. Men in the real world don't respond to that the same way that they do online.
Okay.
Like, when I'm out and about in the world, like, men don't really hit on me. Even at shows, like, people don't come up to me and hit on me. They'll slide into my DMs later and say that they felt something, but
Okay.
they won't come up to me in person. So it's more something that I like, a power that I experience more in the digital realm.
Interesting.
But I guess also, like, just in talking this out, it's like when you think about the power of female sexuality in the way that it's been defined in our culture, and again, it's very much through the male gaze, like, youth is an enormous part of that.
Yeah.
Like, and it's toxic and it's harmful because, I mean, we see it all the time, like, especially in the entertainment industry, the way that women are expected to hold on to their youth at all costs, and it results in, like, insane plastic surgery and
Mhm.
procedures, which I'm all for, and I'm not judging anyone who does those things, but there's an element of that that I find scary and kind of
Mhm.
sci-fi.
Yeah. I think there's kind of 2 interesting things, like, plastic surgery is becoming more and more common as, like, a practice to pursue youth or a specific look. But then also on the other side, there's, like, this digital world that's emerging and the idea of the avatar and, like, realistic AI generated people and photo manipulation to an extreme that I kind of find that there's something interesting there too, that at some point, if we do have like a metaverse or a virtual world that we can go to, we will create people and morph ourselves consistently and to some extent potentially believe that those things or those people are real. And
Right.
so like there's this wild thing that's happening in the physical world that I think is going to translate to like a virtual world, and we're going to have this whole new internet era again.
Yeah, that's I mean, I feel like I'm already experiencing a part of that,
Uh-huh.
like, again, we talked about it in our last episode, but just, like, when I'm sort of engaging online with these men and, like, presenting my Sailor Moon persona to them, like, like, very often, like, in those pictures, like, I'm using a filter. It's not, like, drastically altering my appearance, but it's enhancing it, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? And I'm also presenting a character to them, almost, like, this really, like, almost nymphomaniac, like, crazy sled who's just down for anything, which I am not like in real life at all. And sometimes when these guys, like, wanna meet, I'm just like, "You're not gonna get that."
Yeah.
Like, that's just a fantasy. That girl doesn't exist in real life, or if she does, it's definitely not me.
Yeah.
I guess for me too, there's another dimension to aging, like as a trans feminine person. And I
Mhm.
have this fear also related to this idea of undesirability that, like, what if as I continue to age, like, I just become, like, physically more masculine?
Mhm.
Like, I'm scared of that as well. Like, one of my big fears about aging is that, like, our noses and our ears continue to grow. And I'm just like, there's a
That's not good news for me.
it's not good news for me either, honestly, and that, like, keeps me up at night sometimes. And yeah, so there's a dimension of it that's also related to, like, gender identity, like, as a trans person, and I'm like, yeah, I worry about, like, what I'm gonna look like.
Yeah, me too. Like, there's when we go back to like the original question, there was the element of like connection with my family. The second part for me was the idea of losing my mind. Memory loss, it's so common in my family. But then the third one is to upkeep my body. Like, at what extent will I keep going to the gym or eating well? Will I just do this for the rest of my life to try to have some unattainable thing that my body will just never be able to produce? Or will I at some point just be like, fuck it and just let myself go? And that idea is terrifying.
I don't see you letting go. I see you clinging on. But not clinging on, no, I just think you've developed good habits, like
Mhm.
good eating habits, good exercise habits, and, like, that is gonna serve you well.
Yeah.
Like, I don't have those good habits, like, I do not exercise. I try to eat well, I mostly do, maybe not the best, but I worry about that, like, because I don't have those habits, and, like, again, I'm now 37, like,
Mhm.
what are the chances of me forming these habits now?
You never know.
I mean, I that's the thing too, like, I talk a lot about, like, my vanity in terms of, like, my fears of aging as it relates to becoming undesirable, but, like, what am I willing to do to help
Right.
myself?
How far are you willing to go?
Not very far, so I guess, like, my laziness is more powerful than my fear.
Um, are there some things about aging that you're excited about?
I mean, it's kind of a cliche, but everyone does talk about how much less of a shit you give about things
Yeah.
as you get older. So I'm looking forward to that because I think that I'm still someone who sadly does still give a lot of shits despite myself. It's
Mhm.
like I care about things that I don't want to care about, so I do look forward to that. Um, I like Cher has always said that her 40s were her favorite decade.
Uh-huh.
So, and I do think that's a pretty common feeling for a lot of people who've lived like substantially past their 40s, that people tend to look back on their 40s as like a sweet spot. So I guess like I kind of have that in mind. And I guess ideally I want to make sure to maximize these upcoming years.
Mhm.
Again, if these are gonna be my last hot years, I feel like I have to milk it.
I don't know. I think that, like, there's an ability for a person to feel hot as they age, and even as they get really old. There's different phases of our lives, and what we define as hot and what our perspective of it will change. But I think that I would prioritize what makes you feel hot now and embrace that versus those things will go away because your perspective on what is hot is going to change.
But, like, Madonna's perspective about what is hot never changed. I don't know if it's a given that that perspective is gonna change. I think some people really don't
Yeah.
evolve, and I think that, like, obviously, I don't know Madonna personally, but from what I can gather or infer, I think that she is really holding on to the sexuality and the appearance that she had when she was younger.
Mhm.
I think even with the people that she dates, like, she dates guys who are, like, in their
Sure.
mid-20s,
Mhm.
you know what I mean? Which is not inherently bad. Like, I don't wanna judge Madonna or people in that sort of mentality of clinging on to youth, like, at all costs, but there is a part of it that I do think is sad, you
Mhm.
know? And I think that in our gender episode, we spoke about how sometimes gender can be sort of condemning, like, you have to observe certain codes or perform certain things, and it can be limiting and feel really confining. And sometimes maybe this idea that like youth is best
Mhm.
is also a kind of confinement. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
holding on to that idea instead of just embracing like where you're at and what that means and what it could mean if you don't
Mhm.
limit yourself to the idea that youth is the only powerful way to move through the world.
Yeah. Do you think that if science had the ability for us to slow down our aging process, you would do it? Like, if we could live to be 150, would you choose to do it at a young age?
No, I don't want to live longer. I
Yeah.
just But if I could remain, like, 32,
Huh?
like, physically, not mentally, if I could remain physically 32 or, like, even 28, honestly, um, I would, but I wouldn't wanna live forever. I don't wanna prolong life,
Mhm.
especially, again, with the dangers up ahead, like, and the way that the world is evolving, like, less is more. For me, anyway. What about you?
um, yeah, I think I would want to live a little longer. I
Okay.
feel like I don't need to prolong that I stay this exact version of myself for X number of years, but I would like to slow it down a little bit or choose when I could slow it down a little bit if I want. Like maybe I would want to live in my 30s and 40s just a little bit longer than the other years.
Well, you still would like, let's just say, for example, you freeze your body and maybe even mind at, like, 32 or whatever age you want. Technically, you would still be gaining experiences, you would still be evolving, you would still
Sure.
be in your 50s, you would
Yeah.
just still look like your 32-year-old self, but you would still technically be, like, 55.
I think that like separation is kind of interesting because there's like the aging of the body and then there's experience.
Yeah.
And you could be somebody with a lot of experience at a younger age or somebody that is older that just never had the experiences of the world and just never developed at a certain level and certain capacities. So if you could slow down the body a little bit, but your mind could still develop these experiences of more time, more exposure, and you would live, I think, a more interesting life, or maybe you would just become crazy and
Maybe,
yeah,
because again, like, if your brain is not freezing, then when you reach 55, let's say, or even 60, even if you still look 32, you might still have memory loss issues. You know what I mean? So that's an interesting concept to me, the idea of, like, mentally being older and having some of those, deteriorations
yeah,
while still being physically like perfection. That's an interesting contrast or
yeah,
duality. I guess the second dimension of my fear of aging is the fear that you sort of alluded to of the deterioration. Like
yeah,
I do fear like the idea of losing independence, not even just when it comes to aging, but God forbid, like a horrible accident.
yeah.
I don't even like talking about it because the thought scares me so much.
You and I went through this process of watching the trilogy of T West with Pearl, X, and Maxine. We went to the theater together to see Maxine, which was a wild ride. And then after that, I went back and watched the previous movies of the trilogy, and it was not a comfortable experience watching X and the age and deterioration of the body and this character still wanting closeness and
Yeah,
affection. It felt like a strong illustration of when you deteriorate with your body, it's not only that you lose your mind, but you potentially also like people don't want to connect to you in the same
yeah,
way. And there's a loneliness with it, and you're still human and you have desires. In the movie, there was sexual desires, and even, I guess, a really uncomfortable relationship with another woman who was very young and like wanting the closeness of youth to just be in proximity. It was
yeah.
super uncomfortable.
That trilogy also, I think, either triggered or, increased my fears of aging, and, I mean, we know that in our culture in North America, there is a discarding of the elderly, you know, and
Yeah.
it is sad, like, there are a lot of lonely older people. I think that is a reality of a lot of them, and it's heartbreaking and it's unfair, and I don't think that that longing for connection, not even necessarily romantic, but even just
Yeah.
friendship-wise, I don't think that that longing ever goes away. That's what makes us human, and yeah, I guess that is scary that, the idea of being banished to a kind of loneliness that's not your choice. Um, ugh, it's, like, so depressing.
I have a question. I'm not sure how to tease it out at the moment, but um, as you get older, you mentioned that there's this not giving a fuck starts to emerge.
Yeah,
And there's also this really strong desire to stay connected or be youthful at all cost. Do you feel that as people age and they're not able to access that youth, does this not giving a fuck emerge from that? Like, oh, well, I can't connect to my youth. It's gone and I can't do anything to bring it back. So, like, there's this kind of rebellion of
oh,
that kind of emerges. Is it connected or is it completely unrelated?
I never thought about it that way. We'd have to ask someone older. But I could see there being a connection, for
Uh-huh.
sure. I think also if society's already sort of outcasting you for not being fuckable,
Mhm.
um, I guess once you're sort of forced out of the culture,
Yeah,
in a way, I think you do realize that, like, well, what did it even mean in the first place?
right.
And yeah, I do think there must be a dimension of rebellion involved in that.
If there's something that I could bring from being much older now into my present day approaching 40, I wish I could access that now, and I
Right.
can't. I would just be able to have this much more aligned version of myself that's like a bit more unapologetic or a bit more direct or less people pleasing.
Yeah.
I feel if I had that spark in me, I don't know what it is, but like there's nothing more exciting than seeing somebody who's age and has this like, I know who I am and this is
Yes.
what it is.
I think
And
that's the most powerful thing, and some people do achieve that in
yeah,
their youth. But I think that to achieve that in your youth, you have to really not be concerned with your sort of social currency.
right.
You kind of have to be, I think, at your core, pretty anti establishment,
Uh-huh.
pretty anti capitalist, because you have to be willing to risk potentially like losing opportunities because people want you to care. People
Yeah.
want to have power over you. The system wants to have power over you. It
Mhm.
wants you to be enslaved to this idea that your value is your productivity, and obviously your ability to produce is related to your health and your wellness, and youth is a part of that.
Yeah.
um, so I think that you really do have to be anti-establishment to really truly not care.
Right. Or just have so much privilege in this establishment that it doesn't matter if you lose a bunch of it.
Right,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. But
Uh,
even I don't know, I think the people that do have those kind of privileges, sometimes I think their "I don't give a fuck" attitude is not real.
right.
Because I think if those things really did get taken away from them, they would suddenly care.
Sure.
I think ultimately it's like there's no avoiding it. You know what I mean? And again, it does sort of come back to that idea that, like, it is a privilege to be around,
Yeah.
to be safe, to have access in some ways to healthcare. Um, like, health is a major privilege,
Yeah.
obviously, like, the biggest
Mhm.
one of all. Um, Cher always, like 40s were her favorite, but, like, she's very open about how aging sucks.
Yeah.
She doesn't like it, she doesn't think there's anything good about it, and I think that there's something really funny about that, and I think that there's also an acceptance in that, you know what I mean? And I do think that even though for her aging might suck, like, there is a power in just being able to say that
Mhm.
and just accepting it for what it is and navigating your way through it regardless because it is what it is. Like, no one can stop the clock.
If you were to look at the progress of your life in stages, do you feel that now you are more aligned with who you are?
Yeah,
You do?
I do.
And what do you think, like, if you were to imagine yourself getting older, is there ways that you want to do that or that would bring you into more alignment with who you are?
That's a great question. I don't know, like, because I don't think that I've ever been conscious of the aligning.
Sure.
You know what
Maybe
I
it's
mean?
my projecting onto you.
I think that and it's weird, I think that in so many ways, not in all ways, but in many ways, I have managed to create the life that I wanted for
Mhm.
myself. Like, when I was a kid, I really, dreamed of being an artist. I didn't know what shape that would take, but just I that was sort of the dream, and I think that as I was a teen and even into my early adulthood, I never took that seriously. Like, that just felt like a fantasy. That's not a real thing. How do you even start that? It just felt so impossible. But I did it,
Mhm.
It's not the way that I thought it would look at all. It's not a fantasy. Like, it's really hard and it's really stressful and it's often scary. And I don't really have a whole lot of security or
Mhm.
feelings of security. But I also have like a circle of friends that I never could have imagined having that I always wanted,
Mhm.
a sense of community. Again, we've spoken about this. I just felt so isolated in my childhood. So, yeah, I think that my life kind of looks the way that I
Okay.
wanted it to look.
So then what do you imagine when you think about aging?
I just think about the ways that those things might be taken away from me.
Okay.
Like, I don't think that, and maybe this conversation is like an opportunity to shift that,
Yeah.
instead of looking at aging with fear, to look at it as an opportunity to grow the things that are already good and that
Mhm.
I like about myself and my life, because unconsciously that is what I've been doing for the last 30.
And are there things that you're looking forward to in aging? Like, could if you were to look at it from that perspective of versus it being a fear, are there things that you're excited about?
I think the thing that prevents me from being excited is that, like there are still things that I want to achieve in my career that would hopefully or potentially set me up for some sort of long-term stability,
Mhm.
whether that's solidifying like a kind of notoriety, I guess, because like it just makes things easier when you're known. And I think that it sucks that it works that way, because just because someone is known doesn't mean that they're talented or do great work,
Sure.
But I think that we live in a culture that's so obsessed with numbers and statistics and fame. Um, so I just feel like there are certain things that I haven't achieved yet that I guess to a certain extent kind of worry me.
Mhm.
And I worry that as I get older, the chances of me realizing those things or making those things happen might become harder.
Yeah.
So that scares me.
Mhm.
So I feel like that fear really blocks me from being excited about getting older. I can't say that there's anything that excites me about
Okay.
getting older. I think, like, my fantasy of being older would be to have done enough work to set myself up financially that I can approach work as I want to,
Sure.
with freedom and no pressure and no obligation. Like, if I can have older years that look something like that, that would be the dream.
Tell me more about the fantasy. Like, let's say that you've got your XYZ that you wanted to achieve. Like, what could be exciting about that? You enter your 40s, 50s, 60s, and beyond. You've got your bucket list, and now you can have fun. What would that be?
Well, it wouldn't even be anything that crazy. It would just be more time. Like you
Okay.
said before, like I think it actually really goes back to what you were saying, and how part of your fear of aging is that the opportunities for real love to come through with family or
Right.
other people might pass you by. Um, and even though consciously I don't think that I've ever had that fear, I think hearing you say it makes me realize, because again, in answering your question of like what would be the fantasy is time.
Hmm.
Like, it's time to just to be
Yeah.
present, because so much of our youth is defined by work,
Yeah.
struggling, making money, trying to make ends meet. People our age that have kids, like they're trying to support their families. Like, I think that our 20s up until like what we think of as retirement age is so work based,
Hmm.
and it's hard and it's grueling, and it leaves such little time for the love to come through.
Yeah.
It leaves I know that for me, like, the biggest sacrifice that I think that I've made in the name of work and establishing my career has been
Mhm.
relationships.
Yeah,
Like, not just romantic, but, like, friendships, you know? Like, I've missed so many people's birthdays, I've missed so many people's events
yeah,
because I've had to work, as we all have. Everyone misses all those good things because of that.
yeah,
So my fantasy is really simple. I think my fantasy is just reaching a point of access to resources that allows me to disconnect from the
yeah.
system and just live a life that is centered around people. Because
It's
that's what makes me happiest is people, honestly. I think that the times where I'm happiest in my life, even now, are the times where I get to just be. I mean, we've spoken about it a little bit too, but like that weekend that we spent this fall at your chalet with a
mhm,
couple of friends and your partner and just being with each other and doing mushrooms and having fun and playing games and watching the movies and just talking and cooking for each other and just being.
yeah,
That is what nourishes my soul, and, like, I've had moments like that with other friends and family, like, those are always the most nourishing moments.
yeah. I think it's so sad that if you think about capitalism or the need to work, the hustle to pay the rent, to do all these things, they're all just distractions from love. And
Yeah,
like if we just had leisure and love, like the world would be just such an amazing place. And
exactly.
we have to sacrifice them. And then we grow up and we're like, wait, did all of these things that I was told was going to give me success and happiness, but actually all I really wanted was love.
Yeah.
So
That's so
sad.
sad. But, like, we spoke about that on our mushroom trip. I
Yeah,
think that I've always known those things intellectually, but on mushrooms, like, I felt that on a soul level.
yeah,
I felt that in a way of like, "Oh my god, what the fuck are we doing in this world?" It is really depressing, it is really scary, and you know what? Like, I think that for me, having this conversation with you now has been so eye-opening because even in just that last thing that you said, I think that now it's really clear to me that, like, the fear of aging only exists under capitalism,
uh-huh,
because I think the fear of aging is really just related to our ability to function within capitalism, which is already a hard system, and it
mhm,
only gets harder as you get older.
yeah,
So I think that's where the fear comes from because we live in this
mhm,
capitalistic reality, and the reality is under this system aging makes it even harder.
yeah.
And it's already fucking hard. So I think that's why it's terrifying.
I have to say, there's a part of me that is so excited to age. I have the fear part that's like time is running out, my mind is going, and um, my body was deteriorating, all those things. That's a really large part of it. But there is another part of me that's just like so excited and thrilled. I feel that my whole life I've been putting on these shields and these armors and these identities. And as I'm approaching 40 and I'm moving into that phase of my life, like whether it's arbitrary or just a number or whatever, I really feel this calling to like take those things off and just like lead with the self. Like that's the only armor that I need. That if I can just exude my truth, that I will be so much happier. And I really feel that aging is a tool that will let me do that. Like whether it's rebellion or like not giving a fuck or whatever it is, I feel like the idea of age enables me to lean into that I was just never able to access in my 20s and 30s. So I think like there's a part of me that's like excited and like I have an excuse to be myself. I don't know how to
Yeah.
describe it. And I also think that I'll be softer on who I am. Like I'll
Mm.
look at myself and just be like, you're good enough, or like it doesn't need to be perfect, or like I'm just
Yeah.
gonna have a different vocabulary, or I hope that I'll have a different vocabulary that I can just approach myself with a bit more love than I have in the past. And like maybe I won't go to the gym every day. Maybe I won't eat the best every day. And like I start to think more about what do I want to be remembered by? And I just want to be remembered by somebody that really loved cookies. So like does all of these other things matter? And I want to be remembered by that I just had these truly powerful connections with people that I loved and shared beautiful moments with. And none of those things are the job or
No,
XYZ on a resume, whatever you want to look at. And I just feel like this really strong calling to align more with that or go in that direction. And I just don't know if I just stayed at 20 or 30, I would ever get there. Like, I think
I don't
age is
think
an
so.
accelerator.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think you would ever get to that. Not in
Yeah.
this, not under this system,
Yeah.
you know?
And
Because we're taught so young, so early on in our lives that we're not enough.
yeah.
Like that, I think that is, and it's intentional.
Hmm.
Because if you instill in people really young that they're not good enough unless they do this, and this, which all feeds into the one controlling power of this system,
Yeah.
like they need you to feel like you will not be enough unless you participate in this game and
For
prove that you're
sure.
enough, which is bullshit because we're literally born enough and die enough.
Hmm.
Like there is nothing that any person can do to be enough because you already are.
Yeah.
There's nothing more to be done, but we've been tricked into thinking that we have to do all of these things and
Yeah.
be beautiful and be attractive and be successful and achieve things and make
Yeah.
money and buy things. It's so deeply ingrained,
Yeah.
and it's hard because short of going off the grid, you have to exist in this reality. Like
Yeah.
it's the reality that you've been dropped into.
But I think as you get older, like maybe not 80 or 90 when health is just such a big thing, but in your 50s or 60s, like there's a sweet spot there
Yeah.
where you can still go to the event and wear what you want,
Yes.
and you can decide to go or not, or like these really basic things that you would have just obsessed over, or I would have obsessed over in my 20s or 30s. And I feel like you can, in some interesting way, live in the system but not be a part of it,
Yeah.
or like maybe you have moments where you can just get outside of it or breathe a little bit around it
Yeah.
versus it like suppressing you all the time.
Exactly. And I know it's so cliche, and I do agree with you that there probably is a sweet spot somewhere down the line, but I think that we also kind of just have to treat the present moment as the sweet spot
I
because
know.
we're not necessarily guaranteed that what we're thinking of as the sweet spot
Yeah.
down the road.
I mean, it's depressing, but like there could be environmental
Yeah,
catastrophe,
there's a
could be.
million and one things that could
So then
happen.
why don't we just live like we want to today? Like this is the thing that baffles my mind. Like why?
Because again, like it's not what the system wants.
Yeah.
And people are ingrained in, at least I think that we question it. I know a lot of people in my life ask themselves these same questions and have similar conversations. And, I think that like the writers and the artists that I seek out are creating work that asks these questions and
Hmm.
that pull the curtain back on this fucked up system. But not everyone is like that.
No.
And those people who aren't, they judge us.
Yeah.
And they often, in different ways, make the world unsafe for us unless we perform those things. Like,
Hmm.
there's a great energy behind encouraging conformity,
Hmm.
and it's sort of like these unquestioning people are like the foot soldiers of the system that are trying to get us all in line and make us feel lesser than by judging us, bullying us, threatening us.
Hmm.
But fuck them. We're stronger than them. And what's the alternative? Giving in
Yeah,
to
I don't
that?
know.
I think there's a certain amount, at least where I'm at in my life, there's a certain amount of giving in, but that is becoming less and less. And I always go back to the Kim Cattrall quote of, I don't even want to be in a situation for an hour where I'm not enjoying
Yeah.
myself.
If there's anything that like mushrooms has taught me is when you enter a space, if it doesn't feel right, you just leave.
Yeah.
Like there's just no way in this world that saying like, "Oh, I'm going to stay here because of XYZ." If you don't feel it, the best thing you can do for the other people and for yourself is just to leave.
Yeah, I agree.
Um, I have a couple rapid fire questions that I'd be curious to ask you.
Let's do it.
And the rule is you can only give a one word answer.
Okay,
So the first one is between you and I, who is going to age more gracefully?
both. But I genuinely believe that.
Okay,
I think we're already aging gracefully.
that was 15 words. Who is going to die first?
Oh my god. Probably me.
Describe your sex life at 80.
Extinct.
What's your current bedtime?
11:30.
Okay. Describe a hangover at 40.
Brutal.
Do you think you're going to have a relationship with fiber in the future?
I already have a relationship with fiber.
What's your best anti aging tool?
Masturbation.
Describe naps as an adult.
The best.
Um, what's your old person superpower?
Hmm. Wisdom.
Good. Okay, that's all that I got. Thank you for participating in the rapid fire round.
Well, that was really fun.
Um, was there anything question wise that we didn't discuss that you want to talk about?
No, I think that this conversation really led me to like unexpected places.
Yeah, for me also, like I know that capitalism and the system are definitely intertwined, but it wasn't something that I was like really thought we would spend a lot of
Me
time
either.
on.
I think that I was thinking about this question much more superficially
Uh-huh.
going into it. Like, again, I think my biggest concern at the beginning was just like my appearance
Yeah.
and how the deterioration of my appearance is going to affect me. But what I realize is that it's not really going to affect me.
Mhm.
It just might affect my place in the system. But
Right.
fuck the system.
Mhm.
So there's nothing to be afraid of.
Do you feel that you have role models to look up to that have aged well?
Yeah, I mean, like, I do look at my grandmother. She's 92,
Mhm.
um, and still independent. Her mind is basically the same. Like, when I talk to her, I don't notice any difference in her than when I was, like, 10
Mhm.
in the conversations that I'm able to have with her, and, like, that's such an amazing thing, and God willing, I will age the same way.
Yeah.
But, like, my grandfather didn't age. He had a lot of health complications as he got older, and he passed away, like, 15-ish years ago.
Maybe
Who are your role models?
I don't know. It's hard for me to look at because I typically look at females as
Me
like
too.
the women of like
Like, I love that.
aging. I think
Yeah.
it's like a way society
There's
like
a I mean, it's a much more pronounced enjeu for
exactly.
women than for men.
But like the examples that come to mind for me are like Richard Gere or silver foxes, classic hunks. Like I'd love
Do
to
you think you're
age like
gonna be a hot older
I
person?
hope so. I have to be. But no, I look at some of I guess the younger generation of celebrities like um not Tom Hanks, I have to like
One of the Toms.
one of Tom
Tom
Cruise and
well,
like
he's not
those
young anymore.
I know, but that's what I mean. Like when I see them age, I don't see this like I don't see myself aging like they do,
Right.
or I don't know. It's just a little bit weird, but definitely like hunky, a little bit more chubby, and like
Oh, you're gonna get a little chubby.
a little bit silvery. Like I like the silver look.
Okay, we already have silver in your beard.
Yeah, I'm well on my way.
Yeah. For me, like, it's a very superficial one, but her name is, Karin Reutfeld. She is the former editor-in-chief of Paris Vogue.
Okay.
So she's a stylist and like very big in the fashion world. And like she hasn't really done much like plastic surgery wise. Like it
Uh-huh.
seems very minimal. And she looks like a woman in her 60s.
Yeah.
But she has this elegance and this sex appeal that is just as palpable as it was when she was 40,
Yeah.
you know? Like she's just still so sexy to me.
This is interesting. I started to watch a show on Netflix called Black Doves with Keira Knightley. When I saw her on this new show, I thought that she literally just walked off the set of the Pirates of the Caribbean. She has not aged at all. So, do you think aging in the face is different than aging in the body?
Yes.
And what is like like, would you be okay with if your face stayed perfect, but your body got
I
older?
think face is my priority.
Okay.
Yeah. Um I care less about the body. My
Mhm.
body has already changed a lot, to be honest. You know, like when from the time that I was literally 13 to like 28, I didn't gain a pound
Mhm.
in all of those years. I was always the same weight. I was a little toothpick. When I was in my early 20s, I could literally fit into a pair of shorts that I had when I was 12.
Yeah.
That is not the case anymore at all. And I think that I do an okay job of hiding it, but like in the last like few years, like I've gained like 30 pounds,
Mhm.
which is not, I mean, like whatever. And I'm saying this as someone who is just like who, like many of us, like grew up in the age of the supermodel and MTV and all the music videos. Like I'm still entrenched in that really toxic view of things. For myself, I don't look at others that way, but I do judge my body through that lens,
Mhm.
you know? And for me, like my body really concentrates it like all in my mid area.
Mhm.
Like if my body spread it out a little bit, like put a little in the booty, a little in the thighs, like it would be fine, but it like concentrates it all in one space. And like, but at the
My
same time,
part
I'm just like, whatever.
yeah.
Like, I don't wanna spend my time at the gym, like, that's never been my
Mhm.
thing, and so I think that I've made a choice to just kind of live with it.
I think I have the opposite. Whenever I look in the mirror, the first thing I look at is my body. Like, I have such an uncomfortness about how my body looks versus my face. And last year, like maybe in January, February, March, it was the period that I was the most fit and lean in my entire life. Like I had never been that fit or lean. And it was like the first time that I felt that my idea of my body and my physical body actually lined up really close.
Okay.
I was eating a strict diet, I was training, I was going on walks every day. I was super active, eating super well. And as soon as I slip off of that, I've just lost it. It's almost like a fragment of time where I have this idea of my body and now I don't have it anymore. So it's so weird that I like still go to the gym and I do all these things, but it's just unattainable to
Right.
hold on to it. It really made me realize that our bodies are just constantly changing
Yes.
and that there's no one way to keep it one thing all the time. And
Exactly.
I find it really funny where your body puts fat or like additions of weight and my partner Mark, it just goes only to his ass. Like
He's so lucky.
he can have 100 pizzas, he'll still have abs. It's just his booty gets bigger
He's
and
so
bigger.
lucky. I wish my body did that, honestly.
I'm curious to know about your reaction to watching The Substance.
Oh my god, that's a really loaded question. Um, I think that the substance made me realize that it's not worth it.
Mhm,
I think that the movie is basically like a kind of allegory about the extremes that we are willing to go to hold on to youth, and I don't think it's worth it. I
mhm.
would not want to have that experience.
Yeah.
Would you?
No,
It's not worth
not
it
at
at
all.
all.
I thought, like, I did not expect it to go where it went, and I was so uncomfortable, and I absolutely loved the film, like, I had such a wild experience of watching it, but there's in no way would I go to such an extreme. Like, I think it did a really great job of trying to test where the limit of
Yeah,
beauty and youth is, and
exactly.
Yeah, I don't wanna be a part of
And I
that.
think sometimes, like, I don't think this is necessarily one of the points of the movie, but, like, sometimes in holding on to youth and going through extreme processes to get there, you make things worse for
Yeah.
yourself. You end up being the monster at the end.
Yeah.
You know? Because sometimes I think there is something, and again, this is gonna sound judgmental and whatever, but, like, sometimes there is something much more freaky about a face of bad plastic surgery
Mhm.
versus a naturally aged face.
Well, I
There's
think
nothing like, a naturally aged face, like, it's is not freaky, you know? But some
yeah.
of these plastic surgery botched faces are scary.
I think there's a category of scary, like, there's a Voldemort look that can
Yeah.
emerge, which is, like, terrifying, and then there's a level of plastic surgery increase or, like, the quality is increasing,
Yeah.
but then we're also seeing a sameness of
Yes.
the same look over and over. I feel like sometimes I see the same person everywhere I look in a
Yeah,
restaurant.
and that turns me off so
Yeah,
much. Like, I love unique faces,
yeah.
you know? People used to think Barbara Streisand in the '60s was ugly
Mhm.
or unconventionally beautiful, but she was unbelievably stunning. Like, it's crazy that anyone could have thought that she was ugly.
Yeah.
But I like unique faces and always will.
Great. I think we should wrap it up on unique faces. Is there
Yes.
one last word that you wanna say?
No.
Goodbye. This has been another episode of Intellectual Intercourse. Feel like there's a topic you want us to answer? Send us a message on Instagram at gotta be deep.
Our opening theme song is Wipe My Memory Clean by Farrah Niles.